This is part 1 of the Barton shorts or boxer shorts that we're going to make. You're going to need these 3 pieces of the pattern, a front, a back, and a waistband. They're all labeled with sizes, so make sure you have all the same size. You're going to start with your piece of fabric, which is 100 centimeters or a meter long, and you're going to leave it folded in half so that when you cut out all your pieces, you're going to end up with 2 fronts, 2 backs, and 1 long waistband. Let me show you how we're going to do this. Start with the waistband, lay it down, butting up against the fold of your fabric, and we are not going to cut through that part. Lay out the front and the back pieces and start to trace these with our fabric chalk. You can also use fabric wax or fabric markers. Pick a color that makes sense so that you can see it when you're cutting out. This is the fabric chalk. They do break easily, so be careful with these. You can get a friend to hold the fabric steady so that it doesn't give you so much trouble. When you cut out, use nice long strokes rather than like jagged short cuts. This makes a big difference when you're trying to put your pieces together. This is why we do it on the fold, so we end up with one nice long piece of waistband, and we're not going to need this till later, so you can keep it safe in your bin. Cut out the fronts and the backs, and the extra just goes in the scrap bin. So now what I have here is 2 backs, 2 fronts, and 1 long waistband. The order of this is really important. So you're going to take your back pieces and have them face up or right side up. And then your fronts, you're going to match 1 front with 1 back, and you're going to do those right side down. And this is really important. We need to sew inside out and backwards so that we get really nice seams. Now this back part, they're facing the same way, is the only part that needs to line up. So you'll notice right here along the curve, it's not going to match up because they're different sizes, and that's okay. We want that. But along this side where we're going to sew, that's where we want it to line up. You shouldn't be able to see the right side of the fabric there. They should line up perfectly, and that will make a big difference in your project. You can use these clips so that your fabric doesn't move around while you're sewing, and so that you remember that this is the only line that you're going to sew on your project. Now let's take these to the machine. We're going to sew down this side and this side with 0 and 7, which is a straight stitch and a seam finish. You're going to line up your fabric with the 5/8 line on the needle plate. Lower your presser foot. That's very important. You can remove your first clip and you begin. You're going to sew 4 to 5 stitches forward, then backward, and then forward again. And you are just going right to the end. You're going to follow the curve of this fabric. Always using that 5/8 line as your guide so that your seam allowance is the same all the way to the end. And as you near the end, you're going to use your backstitch once again. When you stop, make sure your take-up lever or your needle is up before you pull. You can trim up your strings, and that's what it should look like. Now we're going to change our thread to the seam finish, which is number 7 on our machine, and that's the zigzag. And instead of lining up on the 5/8 line, we're going to line our fabric up with the edge of the presser foot. Still doing a backstitch when we start. Just going to speed this up for you. And when we get to the end, we're going to backstitch one more time. Always clean up your strings after you're done a line of stitching, just so that they don't get tangled. And the finished product should look like this. Do both sides. The next step is to open these up. You're going to take them to the iron and press your seam open right here. Just going to run the iron along it. This is going to make your project look less homemade, just more clean. Things are going to line up better. You're going to do it on both pieces. Then you're going to have the first set right side up and the other side facing down. And you're going to line up these curves. This is the next part that we're going to sew on both sides. You're going to follow that curve from top to the edge, and on the backs as well. If these pieces don't line up, you might have accidentally sewed 2 backs together or 2 fronts, so pay attention to that. We're going to start with a back stitch, and we are on 0 again. We're just going to follow that line of the curve, and if you're having trouble staying on the 5/8 line with this, just slow your speed down. You need to go all the way to the end and do not sew downward. Once you get to the edge, that's what you want to do, and you want to stop right there. We're going to switch it to 7 as we get our seam finish. And we're going to do that on both sides. And that concludes part 1.